So over the weekend, yes, it was Memorial Weekend, but as you've seen before in the past, there have been a number of attacks in Rafah that have happened while there was either a holiday weekend or some other type of event, whether it's the Oscars, etc. Israel has decided to attack Palestinian civilians while the rest of us are pretty much preoccupied with other things like the Super Bowl. So over the weekend, this was no different. Where the IDF actually attacked a refugee camp in Rafah. This was supposed to be a safe zone for the Palestinian people. So a number of people have been killed. There were people that were actually set on fire because apparently one of those strikes hit, if I remember correctly, hit a tank, and that set things on fire as well. More children have been killed in Rafah, and I want to get started with this story, this clip here from Case Study QB. So Case Study is back from vacation. Let's get into this.
This morning, Israel is facing international condemnation for a deadly airstrike near a tent camp for displaced Palestinians in Rafah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls it a, quote, tragic incident and says there will be an investigation. NBC News foreign correspondent Rafa Sanchez has more from Israel.
This morning, new fallout after that deadly Israeli strike in Rafah over the weekend. An Israeli official tells NBC News it appears that an IDF bomb ignited a gas tank at the tent camp, sending flames ripping through the site as displaced families slept in shelters made of wood and plastic.
Yeah, so it was a gas tank.
At least 45 people were killed, according to the emergency services in Hamas-run Gaza. Many of them women and children. Hundreds more wounded. These three brothers lost their only sister. They say she was 7 months pregnant. The IDF said the strike killed 2 senior Hamas commanders.
And I just want to pause there at that part there. The IDF is saying that this strike killed 2 senior Hamas commanders. First of all, do we have any proof of that? Do we know that that's true? That's just the IDF's word, and they've been known to lie over and over again. So we don't have any proof that that actually happened. And 2, even if it did kill 2 senior Hamas commanders, that still doesn't excuse what happened to the civilians. And that is what the IDF is trying to do. In Israel, they're making these apologies saying it was an accident. It was a oopsie. We've heard them say this before, that it was an accident. It was a mistake. We're actually going to investigate it. Right. And we trust Israel to lead their own investigations. Would you trust a police department to lead an internal police investigation against police brutality? No, you wouldn't. We cannot believe these lies that this is another accident. They know exactly what they're doing. So the question now becomes, how much longer is the U.S. government going to tolerate this? Because other countries are already starting to not just push back, but to separate themselves from the United States. Other countries in the West are separating themselves from the United States when it comes to Israel now. So last time when I told you the world has turned against Israel, believe me, more and more countries are speaking out.
Amid international criticism, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling it a tragic incident and promising an investigation. Though giving no sign he'll halt the military.
Let me pull that out for just a second. Okay, yeah. I just wanted to pull that for just a second because I wanted to make sure. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. We'll bring back in this part right about here.
The White House says the images are heartbreaking, adding Israel must take every precaution possible to protect civilians.
The White House is saying the images are heartbreaking, but the White House is supplying the weapons. None of this is possible. None of this is possible without the weapons from the United States. And another thing I want to add as well, when John Kirby says, unless we see a full scale ground invasion of Rafah, that is not a red line unless we see that. Well, let me tell you what the IDF can do instead. They can, instead of having that full scale ground invasion that John Kirby is referring to, they can just take out different camps here and there until eventually all the people are gone. And the US government would do absolutely nothing because they don't consider this to be a full-scale invasion.
The death toll in Rafah bringing protesters onto the streets.
Yeah, so there were a number of protests. You're going to see more on June 8th. I just want to speed past this part here. There we go.
Families at the Rafah camp had been displaced several times already by the fighting, but were still unable to outrun the war. Why did those innocent people die? What was their guilt, this woman asks. Now they're packing up their tents once again and preparing to move on.
Could you imagine living this way? Every day, you don't know if, you're going to be hit every day. And just living this way where you just constantly have to pack up your stuff and move somewhere else to another so-called safe area that Israel just continues to ignore anyway. This is no accident. You cannot believe these statements from the IDF. These have been targeted attacks. Now, I want to play this clip here where Claire McCaskill actually steps in because, yes, believe it or not, she's back in the limelight of things. And I want you to pay attention to the way that Claire McCaskill frames this, because it's almost like she's trying to condemn the ICC or blame this on the ICC for the reason as why this happened. Pay close attention to her words.
It might be time for us to back up and look at this from the very beginning and realize what Hamas has accomplished here. A horrible terrorist organization that wants nothing more than to wipe Israel off the face of the planet.
So again, repeating AIPAC talking points. Remember, Claire McCaskill used to be a senator, so I'm pretty sure she was probably in bed with the Israeli lobby as well during her political career. Notice how she puts the blame back on Hamas instead of the blame on Israel, where they are the ones that are committing these war crimes, right? Sounds like a trained senator, doesn't it?
Went into Israel and committed atrocities, knowing what Netanyahu's reaction would be, knowing that this would stop the progress of normalizing relationships between Israel and other Arab nations in the Middle East, knowing that there would be a disproportionate response. And when I say disproportionate, I mean numbers of civilians killed. I'm not saying that there's anything that Israel has done that comes close to the horrible atrocities that were purposely committed by Hamas.
Pause. So do you see what she's doing? This is on MSNBC. So although more Palestinians have been killed by the IDF, Claire McCaskill is framing this in such a way to make it sound like more Israelis have been killed. And we all know that is not true. So the death of Israelis, according to Claire McCaskill, is more important and more severe than the death of the Palestinian people. When you have over almost 40,000 Palestinian people that have been killed, that is nothing, according to Claire McCaskill, compared to the 1,200 Israelis that died on October 7th. Piers Morgan has been repeating this talking point. Morning Joe has been repeating this talking point. Alan Dershowitz has been competing. What they are trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is that they consider Israeli life to be more valuable and more important. And the way that they frame this to try to get through to people is by saying that this is all Hamas's fault. Was it Hamas's fault when Israel removes Palestinians from their homes in the West Bank? Is that Hamas's fault too? Was it Hamas's fault when Israel arrests young children and beats young children and abuses young children? Was it Hamas's fault when Palestinian people were protesting peacefully and the IDF shot at their feet? Was it Hamas's fault when the state of Israel sterilized Ethiopian women against their will? You see, that's the atrocity that a lot of people don't like to talk about. You don't see Claire McCaskill mentioning that. They don't want to talk about what happened to the Ethiopian Jewish women. Was that Hamas's fault?
back on October 7th. So Hamas has gotten what they wanted more than anything was to isolate Israel. And frankly, you know what else they wanted? They wanted to recruit more extreme terrorists to their cause. And when you have something happen, like happened over the weekend with these women and children being burned to death in a camp, innocents, that creates more radical terrorists for the Hamas cause.
Who burned the women and the children in the camps? That was the IDF. That was Israel. And if you want to talk about people being recruited for what Hamas's cause, I would say look no further than what's happening to Palestinian people in the West Bank. Where do people think Hamas came from? They didn't just wake up one day and said, hey, we just want to be radical and we're just going to do whatever we want to do for no reason. Where do you think it came from? Those are the people that grew up inside occupied Gaza. Those are the people that were not allowed freedom to move. Those are the people that were stripped of whatever sort of rights they had before they were occupied. Those are the people where a lot of them were refugees. So we can continue this. We can go all the way back to the Nakba. You have no one to blame but Israel itself. You cannot sit up here and kick people out and abuse people and occupy people and oppress people and expect them never to try to rise up against you. You cannot do this. So Hamas has not isolated Israel, Claire. Israel isolated itself from the rest of the world when it decided to go against the statement from the ICJ. Twice. Israel isolated itself from the rest of the world when you had IDF soldiers posting videos of themselves, calling Palestinian people animals, talking about how they are the chosen people, not the Palestinian people, so the Palestinian people shouldn't be there. Israel isolated itself when Netanyahu makes a speech and he tells people in that conference that they want to expand Israel into parts of Syria, into parts of Lebanon, and his idea of the greater Israel. Israel abandoned itself when they sat up here and they started these organizations like AIPAC that have controlled our politicians and basically damn and shame anyone that does not put Israel first. Why living in America, damn it? And I don't know about you guys, but I live in America. And I live in a country where the politicians don't want to put the American people first. I live in a country where people in Flint, Michigan can't even get clean water, but we can give $3.8 billion a year to Israel every year, where they can have free health care and they can have free college education for people in Israel. I don't live in Israel. I live in America. And I've watched our government sit up here and abandon our people, where you can't go past a freaking subway station without seeing homeless veterans on the street. The same ones that they said respect the troops that went and fought for your country and you turned your back on them. That's the country I live in. I live in America where everybody don't have health care in this country. Your country is set. We are not.
So what I would ask Benjamin Netanyahu at this point is what is the goal here? How do you think you're ever going to get ahead of this if by your actions, even if it is a tragic mistake, you're creating more of the very people you're trying to eliminate? It is really, I think it will go down as one of the, I don't know how even in the beginning he thought they could eliminate every single Hamas extreme terrorist in Gaza. So it is what it is now, and I worry for Israel because of how they've been isolated on the world stage as a result of the just sheer volume of innocent citizens that have been killed.
You worry for Israel because when you were a senator, you were in bed with the Israeli lobby yourself. It all goes back to the money, folks. All goes back to the money. But speaking of isolation, something else happened this weekend with Israel. Now, I want to know how they explain this one. It appears that an Egyptian soldier was killed in a cross-border fire near Rafah. Egyptian soldier. Now, Egypt is mad at Israel. Was this an accident as well? Let's get into this clip here from One.
An Egyptian soldier has been killed in a shooting incident near the Rafah border crossing between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. And this border crossing, remember, is controlled by the Israelis now. Both the Egyptian and the Israeli authorities have launched a probe into this incident. The Israeli military reported the incident on the Egyptian border and said that it is in discussions with Egypt. The Egyptian military has issued a statement. It has said that a probe into the death of the Egyptian soldier in the shootout is currently on. The soldier was on protection duty, and according to the Egyptians, the probe is being conducted by the competent authorities. According to the news agency AFP, the Al Qahira news, which has links to the Egyptian intelligence, is quoted a defense official as saying that an initial probe of the shooting incident indicated that Israeli troops and Palestinian militants had exchanged fire, which led to shooting in several directions.
So the Egyptian soldier was shot. This was not an airstrike. He was shot. And you have to remember, Egypt is aligned with the United States. Egypt has been exchanging some words as of late since this happened. Egypt is not feeling this at all and does not feel that this is a mistake. So now you have Egypt is mad at Israel.
He further added that the Egyptian security personnel were taking protective measures and dealing with the source of the fire. The shooting incident occurred amidst tensions between Egypt and Israel over the Israeli forces taking control of the Rafah border crossing 3 weeks ago as part of their offensive on the Gaza Strip. The move has blocked the passage of humanitarian aid into Gaza via Egypt. Earlier, Egypt had also warned the state of Israel against its military operations in the southern Gaza city of Rafah.
So this is another thing. Egypt was against this. Egypt warned Israel against military operation in Rafah. So they were very firm about this, very strong about this.
Though fatal security incidents between the two nations have been pretty rare, a day after the Israeli-Hamas war began in October, a policeman in Egypt's Alexandria had opened fire on an Israeli tour group, killing 2 Israelis and their Egyptian guide. In a previous shooting incident in June 2023, Israel said that an Egyptian policeman had crossed the border and had killed 3 Israeli soldiers before being shot. However, the Egyptian army has said that the Egyptian policeman had crossed the border in pursuit of drug traffickers.
Yeah, it's wild and crazy, you guys. Like we're going to fast forward. I want to fast forward a little bit here because he speaks kind of slow, but I do like One for some of these things. Oh no, he's speaking too slow for me. We'll go to the next one. But Egypt is another one that we need to be concerned about and we need to focus on, because Egypt, again, they're one of the other countries that did speak out against what is happening in Rafah. Again, that is another country that's aligned with the United States. So, I mean, you have, whether it's Norway, Spain has spoken out, Germany speaks out, France speaking out. Egypt's like, what the hell are you doing? Now you're shooting one of our soldiers. What is going on? What is going on, right? I told you that Israel was dangerous and they needed to be stopped. So Israel has isolated itself. Now, of course, Netanyahu is calling this a mishap. All of this is just one big mishap, according to Netanyahu.
Israel is facing backlash for a deadly airstrike, killing dozens of Palestinians at a camp in Rafah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is calling it a tragic mishap, saying they were targeting 2 Hamas leaders. It comes just days after the UN's top court ordered Israel to immediately halt its military operation in Rafah. Here's ABC's Britt Clennon.
Tonight, screams of horror amid a burning inferno. The frightful, frantic moments after Israeli strikes engulfed a refugee camp in western Rafah on Sunday night. Desperate attempts to put out the flames, people scrambling to rescue anyone they can. At least 50 killed and 249 injured in the overnight attack, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. Many people treated with severe burns and shrapnel injuries.
One thing I want to add to, they keep saying that the Palestinian Authority and the health ministry is the one that are talking about these attacks. But I also want to let you know, Egypt has also confirmed some of this as well. It's not just, in fact, I'll pull up my Twitter account to show you that in just a second, where I retweeted about that. It's not just the Palestinian Authority.
Tonight, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling the strikes a tragic mishap, saying there was a technical failure and that the incident will be investigated. The strikes hitting the Tal al-Sultan area. Manal Salman saying, "We were in the tents and suddenly we found rockets falling on us in the same place. There is nowhere safe for us to go." Her family now forced to move for the 8th time.
Could you imagine living in this? Like, look at this. Look at having to live in this. And then not only the fact that they're blocking food from getting in. This is absolutely ridiculous.
To move for the 8th time. The IDF claiming they were conducting an intelligence-based strike, which killed 2 senior Hamas officials, stating they regret any harm to uninvolved civilians during combat.
No, they don't. We've seen the videos of them calling Palestinian people animals. They don't regret any harm that has been done towards civilians when they have said that we need to get rid of all of them. You have a sitting Congress member in Congress, Brian Mast, who even said even the babies were Hamas. Former IDF soldier, by the way. Why the hell is he in Congress? If you served in another country's military, why are you in Congress in the United States? Sounds like to me you might have a conflict of interest, don't you think? Don't think that should be allowed at all.
The White House speaking out, a National Security Council spokesperson calling the images out of Rafah devastating and heartbreaking, adding that Israel must protect civilians, though maintaining the White House position that Israel has a right to go after Hamas. Lindsay, a U.S. official telling ABC News they received information from the Israelis that material from the strike may have ignited a fuel tank, creating that massive fire. And 2 IDF officials telling me that details are still unclear. And Lindsay, authorities are also investigating what happened after an Egyptian soldier was killed in an exchange of fire involving Israeli troops at the Rafah crossing. Lindsay.
Britt, thank you.
See? So, I mean, it's... I don't know how else to say this, but 2 things, sometimes I say 2 things can be true at the same time. This is not one of those times. This is not one of those situations. 2 things cannot be true at the same time with this particular event that happened over the weekend. Okay? Because you attacked the people in the camp, which was a safe zone. And at the same time, you shot an Egyptian soldier. Both of those things can't be mishaps. I don't believe either one of them are mishaps, but the IDF story does not match up. The IDF is shooting anything that walks, anything that moves. That is what's happening. And the world is letting it happen. The US government is letting it happen. Someone is going to have to take the upper hand, and that may mean they may have to put sanctions on the United States government. Because the U.S. government is the one that is supplying the weapons. And hell, why not? We put sanctions on everybody else. That's why they don't want to listen to the statement from the ICJ. Because the U.S. government knows that the ICJ can come after the U.S. government next for being complicit. Even Elizabeth Warren and her flip-flopping ass. She put out a statement. The Israeli bombing of a refugee camp inside a designated safe zone is horrific. Israel has a duty to protect innocent civilians, and Palestinians seeking shelter in Rafah have nowhere safe to go. Netanyahu's assault of Rafah must stop. We need an immediate ceasefire. Elizabeth Warren, the snake, voted for this. You voted for it. Who voted to send the weapons to Israel? Elizabeth Warren. Even Community Notes is calling her out. This year, Senator Warren voted to supply Israel with $3.8 billion of weapons. Sorry, I had to cough. This year, Senator Warren voted to supply Israel with $3.8 billion of weapons and defund the UN's aid organization for Gaza. They even put the bill here so you can click on the bill to see who voted for it. Elizabeth Warren is full of it, as usual. But now there is new information in reference to Israel being isolated. Because you see, now Mexico has decided to step forward. That's right, our neighbor to the south. Mexico is invoking Article 63 of the ICJ statute, filed a declaration of intervention in the case concerning application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip. This is from Mexico. Our neighbor to the south. How embarrassed is the U.S. government? Here's the document here. The ICJ, May 28th, 2024. There's the document there. And you can see the full text of it on the court's website. But yes, Mexico has filed. The world has turned on Israel, and the United States stands alone. We need more of that. Definitely need more of that. And I think I was going to show you guys this as well. One more thing I wanted to show you because I don't want to forget. Yeah, on my Twitter page. There was another thing that I saw that I wanted to show you. Elizabeth Warren is such a disaster, man. Such a freaking disaster. Okay, here we go. Pull this up. We got everybody pulling out the stops tonight. Pierce Morgan. I feel bad about the people, the women and the children, the women and the children. This right here. So remember that Gaza pier that was built for humanitarian aid? It's sinking into the ocean. See, remember that? Look.
וממש מוצף, עוד מעט המשאית נופלת למים, הכל פה הולך לטבוע. ככה זה שעוזרים לאויב.
Just like typical U.S. infrastructure. Fading away. Fading away. And here is the part here about Egypt. So the IDF did respond. Last night, the IAF site carried out intelligence-based precise strike that targeted senior Hamas terrorists in Tal Sultan. Okay, so precise. So you see how they tell on themselves? Precise strike. And yet Israel is saying it was an accident. Which was it? Precise or an accident? And what about the Egyptian soldier? Precise or an accident? The Palestinian Authority, this is what I said, presidency and Egypt accused Israel of targeting the Center for Displaced People. So now the IDF is accusing Egypt of lying too. So it wasn't just the Palestinian Authority. It was also Egypt that accused Israel. What a mess.